In the mist of Hollow Creek, where dawn still clings to the old pines, a frail girl wakes up with her hands in the cold earth. Sophie Fletcher, 11 years old, small but strong, carries not only a basket of freshly picked carrots, but also the heavy legacy of loss that no one her age has ever had to endure. Around Sophie's neck, an old military badge dangles, the only thing that retains the warmth of her father, who fell in a strange desert. Under the flannel shirt worn to the shoulders, Sophie's every step is a whisper to the earth. I'm still here. The old wooden house, with its sagging porch and peeling white paint like a rotten memory, stands silently behind her. No longer a home, but the last bastion against poverty and time. In the cracks of life, Sophie does not seek miracles. She clings to only the smallest things: a bunch of young vegetables, the sound of a rooster crowing in the mist, and the broken memory of a father who taught her that courage is not the absence of fear, but the daring to sow hope in the coldest ground. The morning dragged its cold gray feet across Hollow Creek as Sophie sat hunched behind her crooked market table, her small hands smoothing the wilted edges of a carrot bunch for the third time. The townsfolk passed by without looking, or worse, looked and hurried on, as if her quiet struggle might be contagious. For a moment, Sophie let herself pretend that today would be different, that maybe someone would smile or stop to ask about the farm. Instead, laughter, sharp and familiar, split the air like a whip. Chase, with his crooked smirk and swaggering cruelty, sauntered up, flanked by his pack of hollow-eyed boys. They circled her like vultures, kicking dust and cheap jokes in her direction. One boy accidentally booted her basket of carrots into the mud, sending bright orange spears scattering like fallen soldiers. Sophie knelt wordlessly, gathering them with trembling fingers. She had learned long ago, silence was armor, tears were bait. But Chase wasn't finished. Got a farm, but no family. Got carrots, but no buyers. Tell me, Fletcher, what's it like to be good at nothing? He jeered, his voice slick with mockery. When the market finally thinned and the shadows grew longer, Sophie pulled her rickety wagon back toward the woods, her secret, quieter path home. Or so she thought. The boys reappeared, melting from the trees like bad memories. "Hey, Fletcher," Chase called, a sing-song menace in his voice. "Want to play a game?" Sophie hesitated. Every instinct screamed no, but her pride, raw and aching, wouldn't let her back down. "Come on," another boy grinned. "We found something you've been looking for." Her heart stuttered. Her father's dog. Ranger. Maybe... They led her deeper into the pines, to the splintered remains of Baker's ranch. A sagging gate, the stench of old hay and rust and something worse. Something sour with abandonment. "Go on," Chase urged, his eyes gleaming. "He's in there, waiting for you." Sophie stepped forward, hope battling terror. The moment she crossed the threshold, the gate slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. Laughter peeled through the trees. And Sophie turned. Straight into the eyes of something fierce. Something broken. Something that once knew her name. The gate clanged shut like the snap of a cruel trap. Sophie spun around, heart hammering against her ribs. But it was too late. The boys' laughter faded into the trees, leaving only the sharp smell of rust, wet hay, and something heavier. Fear. In the dimness of the ruined pen, something moved. A growl, low and broken, shuddered through the dirt. From the shadows, a dog emerged. Not the proud canine soldier she had once glimpsed in a photograph, but a ragged ghost made of ribs, scars, and rage. Ranger. But not the ranger she had hoped for. This creature was wild-eyed, feral, teeth flashing behind split black lips as he lunged, chains snapping tight just inches from her boots. Sophie didn't scream, didn't run. Fear was a language Ranger already knew too well. Instead, she closed her eyes against the terror clawing at her throat and reached deeper, into memory, into the voice of her father, steady and sure in a field of long grass. It's not about being bigger, Soph. It's not about being brave. It's about being still. It's about being there. Her knees hit the dirt, slow and deliberate. She lowered her head, tucked her shaking hands into her lap. Not challenging, not threatening, just there, present. For a long moment, nothing moved but the dust in the beams of light slicing through the broken boards above. The growl stuttered, paused. Sophie whispered, her voice small but sure, threading the silence like a prayer. "I'm not here to hurt you." Ranger's breath rasped in the shadows. Another step. Another inch closer. The chains jingled softly now, not in violence, but in confusion. When she dared lift her head, she found his eyes, haunted, desperate, locked onto hers. And slowly, achingly, the war in him ebbed. With a sound more sigh than snarl, Ranger sat down, right in front of her. Like a soldier waiting for a command he still remembered how to obey. From the edges of the broken barn, the boys stood frozen, no longer laughing. Tommy Grant, the youngest, his phone trembling in his hand, had captured everything. The gate slamming, the growl, the miracle. A girl and a ghost of a dog, stitched together by something stronger than fear. Memory. Blood. Maybe something older. Chase muttered under his breath, trying to summon the old sneer, but it broke apart in his mouth like wet paper. No one answered him now, because they had seen it. All of it. And deep down, even the cruelest of them knew. They had awakened something they didn't understand. The distant crunch of tires on gravel broke the moment. A battered sheriff's SUV pulled into the clearing, dust rising like a warning. Sheriff Nolan Hayes stepped out. Slow. Heavy. The kind of man who carried silence the way others carried weapons. His hand rested near his belt, but he didn't reach for anything. He didn't need to. He took in the scene with one sweeping glance. The broken fence, the scattered boys, the girl sitting cross-legged in the mud, her hand resting lightly, fearlessly, on the head of the beast they all thought would tear her apart. But the beast wasn't growling. He was leaning into her touch, breathing her in like a lost traveler recognizing home. Hayes knelt slowly, his voice low enough to blend with the wind. "You knew her, didn't you, boy?" Ranger's ears flicked toward him but never left Sophie. Hayes exhaled, long and worn, like a man letting go of something he'd carried too long. He turned his eyes to Sophie, eyes not of suspicion, but of quiet awe. "You're Fletcher's girl," he said, more a certainty than a question. Sophie nodded once, the dog tag at her throat catching the morning light like a small, stubborn star. Without another word, Hayes straightened and pulled out his radio. By nightfall, the video, the girl, the dog, the impossible, had already threaded itself through every house, every heart in Hollow Creek. A wildfire made not of flames, but of something even harder to contain. Hope. Inside the sheriff's office, the air smelled faintly of old paper, leather, and dust. The kind of place where stories go to sleep. Forgotten. Rachel Boone, the deputy with the weathered eyes and the patience of someone who knew grief like an old tune, rummaged through a battered manila folder. She slid a single page across the desk toward Sophie. A page yellowed by years, its edges curled like the hands of someone who had clung too long to hope. At the top, in a familiar, steady scrawl, James Fletcher. Rachel cleared her throat, but the words still snagged when she spoke. "We found something. Something he left for you." Her fingers brushed the paper, a motion almost reverent, before she began to read, her voice low and breaking in places. "To my Sophie. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. But that doesn't mean I'm gone. I left part of myself with a friend, a soldier like me. His name is Ranger. He's stubborn, brave, and, when the world goes dark, He'll find the light for you. Trust him, Soph. He'll know you. And, through him, you'll know me. I love you, kiddo. Be brave." The words hung between them like smoke, heavy, sacred, unforgettable. Sophie pressed her palm to her chest where the dog tag lay, and for a moment, she wasn't an orphan in a broken town. She was a daughter still tethered to her father across time and death by something fiercer than blood. Across the room, Ranger shifted, the heavy thud of his tail a small, steady heartbeat against the floor. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. The space between them was already filled with something wordless, a bridge made of memory and bone and belief. Rachel wiped at the corner of her eye, pretending it was dust. Sheriff Hayes simply tipped his hat lower, hiding his face. No one said it aloud. They didn't have to. Ranger wasn't just a stray. He was a promise. And somehow, against everything, that promise had found its way home. The courthouse in Hollow Creek had never seen a crowd like this. Not for zoning permits, not for tax debates. Today, it buzzed, low, electric, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Sophie sat stiff-backed in the front row. Ranger curled loyally at her feet. His head rested against her battered boot, eyes half closed, but always alert. The old leash in her hand wasn't a chain. It was a lifeline, woven from trust, stitched with memory. Across the aisle, Chase and his father loomed, polished shoes, polished lies. Mr. Bishop's voice slithered through the courtroom like oil over stone. "Your Honor, we have a dangerous situation here. An aggressive animal. A traumatized child. My son, Chase, witnessed the attack. He's been emotionally scarred. We demand the animal be removed for everyone's safety." There it was. Painted neat and cold. Sophie the fool. Ranger the monster. A tidy little lie. The judge, Deborah Mays, silver hair pinned in a no-nonsense bun, turned her gaze toward Sophie. It was not an unkind gaze, but it was sharp, weighing more than just words. Waiting. Rachel Boone rose next. No theatrics, no trembling hands. Just the simple, devastating truth. "I watched the footage myself, Judge. That dog, Ranger, didn't attack." He remembered Sophie's father. He chose loyalty over fear. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. It was recognition. And then Sheriff Hayes, a man who measured his words like gold, took the stand. His voice rumbled low and steady through the room. James Fletcher trained dogs to trust their better instincts, to protect, not destroy. Ranger isn't broken. He's proof that even after everything, loyalty survives. The room shifted. Doubt cracked. And into that crack, light. In the back, a small figure stood awkwardly, twisting the hem of his sweatshirt. Tommy Grant. The boy who had filmed it all. His voice shook, but he stood tall. "It wasn't her fault. Chase locked her in. We thought it was a joke. But Ranger didn't hurt her. He sat down, like he knew her." Silence, deep and ringing. Not the silence of judgment, the silence of hearts turning. Sophie rose slowly, the leash slipping from her fingers like a ribbon of trust. She stood before the judge, hands clenched, the weight of the dog tag pressing into her chest. Her voice, when it came, was small, but unshakable. "Everyone thinks I'm just a kid, that this was some accident, but it wasn't. Ranger didn't hurt me because he remembered. And I remembered too. Not with my head, with my heart." A long pause. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Sophie Fletcher," she said at last, voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "You have shown courage, compassion, and an understanding of responsibility beyond your years. Therefore, by the authority of this court, Ranger is yours, not just by law, by right." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Then applause, tentative at first, then a swelling roar like a dam breaking. Miss Harper from the feed store. Tommy's grandmother. Even Mr. Jenkins, the gruff hardware clerk with the heart of a stubborn old oak. Sophie stood blinking, stunned, until Ranger nudged her leg with his nose. A soldier's quiet salute. It was real. They had won. And somewhere, Sophie could almost hear her father's voice. Proud, laughing, alive in the spaces between her heartbeats. Told you, kiddo. Be brave. Spring rolled into Hollow Creek like a slow forgiveness, and with it, change came to the tired bones of the Wilson farm. Not the kind you could measure in dollars or fresh paint, but the kind that stitched itself quietly into the soil and stayed. Where once there was only brittle grass and broken fence posts, new life stirred. A row of crooked poles tied together to form a rough agility course. A patchwork of folding chairs set up under the sagging cottonwood, where Evelyn had once told stories to a girl too small to carry the world but too stubborn to put it down. A new sign hung on the battered gate, hand-painted in uneven letters. Ranger's Way. Every Saturday morning they came. Children with their sleeves too long, their eyes too guarded. Children from back porches and foster homes and places no one wanted to talk about. They didn't come for therapy. Not the way adults said it, like medicine you had to swallow. They came for something else. Something wordless. Something waiting. And Ranger was there to meet them. The broken soldier with the scarred muzzle and the eyes that had once seen too much. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He just stayed. Still and steady, like a lighthouse against the storm that lived inside so many of them. There were no lectures at Ranger's Way. No tidy speeches about healing or hope. Only quiet mornings where small hands brushed coarse fur. Shy laughter breaking through the hard shell of silence. And trust. Slow. Stubborn. Precious. Growing between cracked sidewalks and wounded hearts. Sophie didn't try to lead with words. She let Ranger teach in the way only the broken can. By being there. By choosing to stay when everything in the world had once told him to run. One afternoon, a boy named Jonah, a foster kid who hadn't spoken a full sentence in months, curled up beside Ranger under the cottonwood tree, his small fingers buried deep in the dog's thick coat. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Sophie sat nearby, her knees pulled to her chest, the old dog tag warm against her heart. She closed her eyes and listened to the sounds the world rarely noticed. The slow thump of Ranger's tail. The sharp call of a hawk overhead. The sigh of a boy learning, maybe for the first time, that he didn't have to be afraid anymore. And somewhere, she thought, her father was smiling. Not because she had saved anyone, but because she had stayed. And sometimes, staying was the bravest thing a soul could do. One rainy afternoon, a truck pulled up the gravel path of Ranger's Way. It wasn't like the others. No parent clutching a child's hand. No shy kid peeking out from behind worn sleeves. A man stepped down. Big. Weathered. Moving like someone who knew the weight of armor even without wearing it. Sergeant Owens. A combat veteran from wars most people only knew through headlines they didn't finish reading. His hands, calloused and cracked, hung stiffly at his sides as he crossed the muddy yard. He stopped just short of the cottonwood tree, as if the simple act of getting that far had cost him something invisible. Ranger looked up from where he was lying, lifted his head, and waited. No bark, no wagging tail, just stillness, permission, an offering. Owens crouched slowly, like a man approaching a grave he wasn't sure he could face. He stayed that way, hunched, silent, for nearly 20 minutes. No words, no reaching hands, just breathing the same wet, heavy air. Then, without a sound, he reached out. 2 fingertips brushed Ranger's fur. The big dog's tail stirred once, slow and heavy, like a pendulum swinging free after years stuck in rust. When Owens finally spoke, it came out cracked and raw, like something ripped from deep underground. I haven't touched a dog since Afghanistan. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. And Sophie, sitting nearby with her knees tucked to her chest, understood. Some wounds you didn't heal. You carried them. You learned to carry them softer. Weeks later, a small documentary crew came. Not the loud, flashy kind that wanted drama and tears on cue, but quiet filmmakers with old cameras and patient hands. They spent a day walking the fields, filming the silent symphony that had grown here. Sophie helping Lily thread a lead through shaking fingers. Ranger nudging Jonah's trembling hand. Evelyn smiling from the porch, wrapped in her patched quilt like a queen in exile. Mr. Hank dropping off hay with a simple nod. No fuss. No staged speeches. No miracles in neon. Just small, stubborn acts of faith stitched together until they looked like hope. When the footage aired weeks later, something unexpected happened. It didn't go viral because it was shocking. It spread because it was real. Because in a noisy, broken world, someone had remembered how to stay. The Hollow Creek Harvest Fair smelled of cinnamon and sawdust and hope. Booths lined the meadow, laughter floating over the crowd like soap bubbles. But Sophie didn't notice the bright colors or the cheerful noise. She moved quietly through it all, her boots stirring little puffs of dust, Ranger matching her step for step. It wasn't nerves that clenched her stomach. It was something older, a knowing, a turning of seasons inside her skin. Everywhere she looked, she saw faces she used to avoid. The shopkeepers who once looked past her. The neighbors who whispered about that poor Fletcher girl. But today, they didn't see a ghost of tragedy. They saw someone who stayed when staying was the hardest thing. Children darted up to Ranger, their hands tentative at first, then bolder. Parents watched from the sidelines, some smiling, some blinking too fast. And in those small, trembling touches, Sophie saw it. This was how healing started. Not in big, shiny moments. In the quiet bravery of reaching out, again and again, until the world softened in your hands. That evening, as the sun melted into the hills and the fairgrounds emptied, Sophie wandered back to the old training arena they'd built at Ranger's Way. The folding chairs were empty now. The banners flapped in the cooling breeze. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Like a promise kept. Ranger sat beside her, his scarred muzzle tilted into the wind, ears twitching at some sound only he could hear. Sophie knelt down, the grass damp under her jeans, and unclipped the worn dog tag from around her neck. She held it in her palm, small, battered, heavy with the weight of 1,000 memories. The engraving had faded in places, but she didn't need to read it to remember. "I'm still here, Dad," she whispered into the dusk. "We made it." Ranger bumped her shoulder gently, a soft huff leaving his nose. Sophie laughed. A real laugh, free and bright, the kind that cracked open something golden inside her chest. She stood, slipping the tag back into her pocket. Not as armor anymore, but as a part of her. A root. A light. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do. More kids to teach. More broken pieces to gather carefully into something new. But tonight was theirs. As the stars winked awake over Hollow Creek, Sophie and Ranger walked the long road home, their shadows long and steady behind them. Not survivors. Not strays. Builders of something the world had almost forgotten. Hope that didn't ask to be seen, only to be carried. And this time, they weren't just starting over. They were just getting started. The fields at Ranger's Way stretched wide under a quilt of gold morning light. The cottonwood tree, once battered and brittle, now stood thick and strong, its branches heavy with the weight of 100 whispered dreams. Sophie Fletcher, no longer the small girl with dirt-streaked cheeks and broken boots, stood near the old training ring. Older now, taller. But her eyes still carried the same quiet fire that had first tamed a wounded soldier with 4 legs and a broken heart. At her side, a young German shepherd pup, all oversized paws and boundless wonder, sat, looking up at her with the unfiltered adoration Only the very young know how to give. The pup's name was Tag, after the piece of metal that had once been all she had left of her father. Near the fence, a group of children laughed, real, unguarded laughter, as they led gentle, graying dogs through simple obstacle courses. Among them were kids who had once arrived with fists clenched and eyes downcast. Now, they ran freely, shouted freely, trusted freely. The world beyond Hollow Creek had shifted and stormed and broken itself in new ways. But here, beneath the stubborn, endless sky, Sophie had built something that the world couldn't tear down. A place where the bruised could breathe. A place where loyalty was a language stronger than fear. She knelt down, running her hand through Tag's soft fur, feeling the thump of his tail against her boot. Somewhere far off, she imagined Ranger, his spirit woven into every fence post, every blade of grass, watching, approving, still staying, still guiding. Sophie smiled, lifting her face into the warm sweep of the rising sun. Behind her, Ranger's way stretched on, a living thread of hope, stitched one small miracle at a time. The past had shaped her. The pain had tempered her. But love had built her. And now, she was the lighthouse. The steady fire on the hill for anyone who needed to find their way home.